Kickstarting a stalled peace process, the jailed leader of Kurdish rebels calls for a new era in Turkish-Kurdish relations. What does it mean for the Kurds' dream of independence? How much does a Kurdish state depend on Ankara? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. They were denied self-rule after the First World War, and they're the largest ethnic group in the world without their own independent state. The Kurdish people, though, continue to dream of independence. Well, while a fragile peace is holding between Turkish forces and the Kurdish rebel population, various Kurdish forces have united in the fight against ISIL in Syria. And Iraq's Kurds have been empowered by the chaos sweeping that country. So, is a fully independent Kurdistan now a possibility? Well, the Kurds are mostly Sunni Muslims. They are united in race, culture and language. However, they have no standard dialect. There are more than 30 million Kurds in the Middle East. Their communities mainly straddle the borders of Turkey, Syria, Iraq and Iran. Now, the shaded area shows where Kurds make up 75 to 100% of the population. And here we see where the Kurds are more sparsely populated. Let's bring in our guests into the show in Istanbul. Galip Dalay, he's a regular contributor for the German Marshall Fund. Joining us from Ankara is Bilal Sambur, chairman at the Institute for Political, Social and Economic Studies. And completing our panel from London is Dr. Sevan Said, a specialist in Kurdish-Turkish conflicts and faculty member of the University of Exeter. Welcome to you all. They often say history moves in circles, and I know you've studied history a lot, Sevan. They often also say the best way to try and tell the future is to look into the past. Do you think there will ever be an independent Kurdistan or Kurdish state?
The dream of independent Kurdistan is in the heart of every Kurdish person, whether they are political or they are ordinary Kurdish people. However, the mechanism of the Kurdish independence and Kurdish autonomy is changed recently, especially in the very historical announcement of yesterday's speech by Mr. Öcalan that has been read in Diyarbakir, the major Kurdish city, or can be called as capital city of Kurdish people in the north part of Kurdistan or in Turkey. In Kurdish and Turkish language has been read. In this speech, historical speech, you can see that the history is continuous and the form of the autonomous and independence of the Kurdish people can be changed. As everybody knows in this panel, these two colleagues as well.
Changed in what sense, Sevan, if you don't mind me jumping in? Changed in what sense? What did you see as a change in the narrative as a result of the message coming from people like Abdullah Öcalan?
The course and the game that is being played by Kurdish people for 100 years was not as appropriate to gain the tactic and strategic way of gaining something for Kurdish people, whether independence or semi-autonomous or at least cultural and social rights. However, now, since the Kurdish people and Abdullah Öcalan as a leader of this entity that is called KCK, Kurdistan Unions of Communities, and actually the PKK is part of it, they are ruling in a very great way in terms of the strategic and successful way to find the Kurdish cultural and social rights within Turkey and in the region, not only Turkey, actually in the whole Middle East, but without harming the borders of the international borders that call Turkey, Syria, right, Iraq and Iran.
All right,
so we're talking still about the right is there, the demand is there. However, the form and the way of the entity of Kurds is being changed.
Perhaps
actually
heading more towards autonomy. And what's really interesting, Bilal, here is we started out this discussion asking a very broad question: will there be an independent Kurdistan anywhere in the Middle East? And we find the discussion often going towards what's happening within Turkey, which it does bring to mind the question: to what extent are the Kurds' political future dependent on the dynamic of policy from Ankara and the dynamic of the relations between Kurds and Ankara?
Thank you for having me at the program. First of all, regarding the possibility for the independent Kurdistan, I think this is a real possibility. Probably in the future Kurdistan regional government will be an independent state. But in the case of Turkey, at the present social condition, Kurdish community in Turkey, their priority is not the first is to having an independent Kurdish state, rather than they want a democratic Turkey and they want a democratic right as a Kurdish nation.
So if that's, sorry,
the unity
Bilal,
of Turkish state.
If that's the case, then where do you see an independent Kurdistan arising? If, as you're saying, the Kurds in Turkey are happy to pursue some form of autonomy.
So yes, that is the case. But what I am saying is, in Iraq, I mean, Kurdistan regional government probably in the near or far future will be an independent state. This is a very strong possibility. But in the case of Turkey, situation is different. In the case of Turkey, the demand and priority is not for independent Kurdistan, but demand is for autonomous region within the unity of Turkey.
Let's bring in Galip into the discussion here. Whenever we talk about the possibility of an independent Kurdish state or Kurdistan, that's always been a very sensitive issue for Ankara. Even if we're talking about that possibility outside of Turkey's borders, where do you think at this point, what does Ankara's vision for the Kurds look like?
Well, I mean, thank you very much, first and foremost, for having me. One of the primary concerns that Turkey previously had, and it stemmed from the fact that Turkey actually denied the existence of its own Kurdish population, that Turkey suppressed the Kurdish identity of its population. And back then, when Turkey adopted such a heavy-handed policy, the policy of assimilation and denial towards Kurds inside, it had a very securitized approach towards Kurds outside. So therefore, like, you know, it was highly sensitive towards any manifestation of Kurdish national demand or Kurdish political demand, not just within Turkey, but outside of Turkey, because it feared that will set a precedent for Kurds within the Turkey. However, in recent years, the thing has changed. Right now, you know, the policy of denial and the policy of assimilation has gone. Right now, we are talking about, like, you know, in what way and in what way the Kurdish issue needs to be, you know, settled politically in Turkey. And the Turkey and KRG, Kurdistan Regional Government, is not only Turkey stopped, you know, discarded its previous policy of hostile policy towards the Iraqi Kurdistan, and actually it formed like a quite close relation, if not strategic relation, with the Iraqi Kurdistan. So one cannot say that Turkey totally abandoned its previous policy of no Kurdistan, but I assume that Turkey perceives less and less threat from a Kurdistan, as, let's say, like, you know, in Iraq and Iraqi Kurdistan. It perceives less threat today than it perceives.
And that's why, and that's why, Galip, because they're making progress internally, that Turkey's not as worried today about what the Kurdish population within Turkey might do as it might have been 20 years ago?
Well, that's partially, yes, that's exactly why it is. Because, I mean, let's not forget, like, for instance, like, one of the difference between Iraqi Kurds and the Turkey Kurds is very much socially integrated with the rest of the country. Istanbul is, in the end, the largest Kurdish city in the world. It consists of something like 3 to 4 million Kurds. And especially once the Kurds feel that it is being also, like, treated as a first-rate, as a, like, you know, first-rate citizen of the country, its democratic right and its national right, its political right granted, why would Kurds, like, you know, seek a cessation from Turkey? And this is not even like the demand of Kurdish national movement.
All right, since we're starting to talk about all the different groups at this point, Kurdish groups in Turkey and Iraq, let's sort out who the main players are before we get too deep into the acronym alphabet soup. Let's start with Turkey then. Kurdistan Workers' Party, or the PKK, is the main armed group. That's banned, though. It is in talks with the Turkish government right now. Then, of course, there's the People's Democratic Party, or the HDP. That's regarded as the main legitimate Kurdish political party. It'll take part in elections, for example. Let's take you over to Iraq, where Kurdistan regional government, their power is shared by two main factions: the Kurdistan Democratic Party, the KDP. That has ties to the Turkish government. And there's also the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, the POK, which is closer to Iran. Now, Syria's Democratic Union Party, the PYD, is officially on Turkey's terrorist list because of the PYD's ties with the PKK. However, the PYD does enjoy contacts with Turkey. And in Iran, there's the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, or the KDPI, which was fighting with the Iranian government but announced a ceasefire in 1996. Let me bring Bilal back into the discussion there. The improvement in perhaps the relations, the negotiations between Ankara and PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, some of the Turkish Kurdish groups which was being referred to by Ghalib. Do you see that these talks are going to succeed? Do you see the situation of Kurds improving? Do you feel like they're moving towards a more democratic order where both Kurds, Turks or other minorities all feel like they're equal citizens?
Well, I think so far both sides, they have done very well. They try to know each other. They try to understand their position, their demand. Although so far, in terms of implementation of democratic rights and reform, Turkish government has not done its responsibility. But in practice, in terms of the future of the peace talk between Turkish government and Kurdish movement, we could see that there will be a process with open possibilities. I mean, I think if we want to understand this process, we shouldn't focus on the result. At the moment, we must focus on the process, because in the process, many fruits comes out, and rather than saying at the end, Kurds will gain this right or gain this position, I mean, from under this present condition, we could say that both sides know that they have their position is not suitable. For example, the position of Turkish government is not. Turkish government has no power to, for example, to design a new constitution or to recognize Kurdish linguistic right. But at the end, through the process, practically Turkish government, for example, they allow a large space for Kurdish people to practice their culture, their language, their social life. So it is not just a formal procedure, I think. It is more than that. It is a sort of, it involves political, social, cultural, and political dimension. So in terms of this multidimensional level, I think Kurdish people now, they are satisfied that their identity has been recognized by government, but at the same time they demand that Turkish government must implement their collective rights.
Sivan, I can see you're shaking your head in some degree of disagreement. Go ahead.
Actually, I would like to go from the point that Mr. Bilal tried to say that the government has given some of the rights. I would like to say that actually the Turkish state as a unique state in the world that never happened in the history of human being, that some state trying to give the right, cultural, social, and language, or all these rights to its own people within its border, and then marketize it and tell the world, say, look, I am giving the right for my people to speak their own language, to have their own color, to have their own class or in classroom if they have. So I would like to just say this is for 100 years since the collapse of Ottoman Empire, this nation state, the notion of nation state is coming to unify all the people in the country. Just to give you the information that for time being we are talking 49 different ethnic groups and religious groups in Turkey exist, but we are only formally calling all of them Turks. And
but
this is still in the constitution, it's not being changed.
There will be a lot of competition for that list of countries which are accused of not giving full rights or recognition to their minorities. Perhaps if we dig out of that a little bit...
That no one can marketize it. That's what I was trying to say. However, I'm sorry to stop it. What I am just trying to say, the notion of nation state is being attacked by the 10 points that on 28th of February is being announced in Chanakaya's palace. I mean the palace of presidency or prime minister in Ankara by Kurds and deputy prime minister in Turkey. These 10 points are trying to talk about new constitution by Ankara. Sorry. And then talking about the sharing country, sharing democratic constitution and democratic place for everybody, just ending the era of unification and the very big process of assimilation happened for the last 90 years in Turkey, in that area that now we call it Turkey. This is the main important things that Kurds demand, no matter whether there's a name of Kurdistan or independent Kurdistan or free Kurdistan, these kind of bright names that some Kurds like to be mentioned in this kind of announcement.
Right.
However, the practice of this are very important, which is talking about diversity and autonomy, and is coming from the idea of the project of democratic autonomy that is being announced in 2011, actually. So this is not that new.
All right, Galip, it does seem that we can disagree perhaps on some of the detail, but generally speaking, some progress is going on inside Turkey, is it not? And one wonders, how would any progress, success in that process of talks between the Turkish state and the Kurds, how will that impact the ambitions, the chances of statehood or power for Kurds elsewhere in the region, outside of Turkey? Does that undermine their chances if the Turkish Kurds are fully integrated, shall we say?
You mean like, does a settlement of Kurdish issue in Turkey undermines the quest of Kurds outside of Turkey for statehood? Is that the question?
Yes, indeed. Perhaps in Iraq, perhaps in Syria, other areas where Syria, of course, they've already declared their independence, or at least their autonomy in 2013.
I see. Well, I mean, I don't think so. And actually, like, if anything, it might have a reverse, like, it might have a different impact, because if Turkish Kurds become happy with the new status in Turkey, like with their full political rights granted, with their full, with the whole channel of democratic participation is granted, I think Turkey will perceive less threat from the Kurds gaining ground in other parts of the Middle East. Because in the end, one of the factors that thus far created the Turkish perception of threat regarding any gains of the Kurds outside of Turkey, because it regarded the Kurdish gain as a Turkish loss.
Okay,
and the reason it did it is because it...
Hold that thought, if you don't mind, because that's a very interesting point that you've hit on there. I want to come back to Sivan briefly then. If the regional situation is changing, Kurds are being empowered because of the fight against ISIL, they're receiving international support, and if, as we're hearing from Galip, perhaps the Turkish state is perceiving the ambitions of Kurds in places like Iran as less threatening, what does that mean for the ambitions of Kurdish parties in the Kurdistan regional government? Do you see a scenario where they push for independence?
Okay, the answer is yes for you, but actually the main change has happened in the area, in the region, is not because of external, as much as because of the changing of the value of Kurdish people to recognize their own rights, and they try to fight for themselves. For the first time in the history, Kurds in the area, especially in Syria, we can see they are fighting for themselves. They are not fighting for others, and they are looking for their own autonomy. So the idea of changing the values of Kurdish people to respect the minorities, to respect the women, to respect those people who they are depressed, and try to make the right for all others, because for 100 years Kurdish people as a minority under the Turkey were minority and they were depressed, so they don't want to be perpetrated as they were victims. Right. That's why they are looking for democratic autonomy rather than nation state building. That's why these others who they are looking at them, they are thinking changing. Another important point, that they are Kurds now, they're very much actual force fighting against the Islamic states more than even Iraqi state and Syrian state. So this is make credit to Kurdish people and Kurdish politicians to just have some support from others, and KRG definitely in this respect will be a good winner for getting closer from independence.
All right, you made that point. I want to come back to Galib because I cut you off and you're just getting into the reasons for the changes which you see going on. So let me give you a second to wrap up that thought.
Exactly. I mean, right now, Turkey, like as I said, like, you know, once the Turkish Kurds, I mean, let's not forget, like PKK 10 or 15 years ago was asking for, their whole political motivation was establishing an independent Kurdistan. And when there was such a, you know, when there was such a goal, Turkey was like alarmed about like any manifestation of Kurdish statehood. But right now, since the PKK like basically abandoned this goal, and also like, you know, Turkey and the Iraqi Kurds established such close ties, like such cordial ties. Like, let me just give you a figure. If Iraqi Kurdistan today was an independent state, it would have figured number 4 as a trade partner of Turkey.
That's
so
huge.
That shows how much, yes, that shows how much, like, you know, interest both sides has, like, you know, in maintaining very close relations.
Indeed.
Again, that doesn't mean that the Turkey has changed its whole political calculation vis-a-vis the Kurds. But just looking from outside, like looking at the public discourse, political discourse, I mean, like, you know, the public perception of the Kurds outside of Turkey, I think there is a significant transformation.
All right, the change has definitely been there.
It's also like
we got a few minutes.
It's energy and etc. So therefore, like, you know, I think there is less strengthening a Kurdish state in Iraq today than it was.
Let me bring Bilal into the discussion. We've talked a little bit, quite in detail, about what's going on in Turkey and Iraq. What we haven't talked so much about is Syria. Now, there you have obviously a conflict brewing. Bilal, as I'm sure you're aware, you've also had the main Kurdish party there, the PYD, declare autonomy in 2013. I guess my question is, where is that heading, and where are relations between the PYD and Turkey heading?
Well, I think it is a sort of love and hate relation, a sort of. Both sides, they have a mixed feeling towards each other. Official position of Turkey toward PYD is against it. It recognizes PYD as a terrorist organization like PKK. And also Turkey definitely against the autonomous region in Syria, Kurdish autonomous region in Syria. On the other hand, PYD say that we are not enemy of Turkey, we want to be a good neighbor of Turkey, we want to develop of Turkey. And the yesterday declaration, Öcalan called about Eşme split. So Eşme is a village within Rojava. As you remember that this historical tomb had been removed from Syria to the Eşme village. So from Eşme village, Öcalan tried to create a symbol for the historical Turkish-Kurdish alliance. So Rojava or PYD could be a possible partner for Turkey in the future.
Just to clarify for our viewers there, you're talking about the operation where Turkish troops moved a very important grave to Turkey, within Syria, but to a part of Syria which is under the control of the PYD, the main Syrian Kurdish party. It does beg the question very briefly, Bilal, if Turkey can make peace, or is in the process of making peace with the PKK, why would it have a problem with the PYD, the ally of the PKK in Turkey? Do you see a more sort of regional coming together underway?
Well, I think apparently it seems a sort of contradictory or inconsistent situation, but that's the nature of the problem. I mean, you can't have just a consistent policy towards all the partners within Kurdish movement. I mean, sometimes you have possible relation with PKK, sometimes you have positive relation with PYD. That is the nature of the relation, but we could say that Turkey is moving in a positive way at the moment.
And that's certainly been the case, hasn't it, when it comes to relations between the different Kurdish factors, sorting out sort of long-term alliances. That's a whole nother issue, though, which we'll save perhaps for another show and another day. At this point, we have to thank our guests and wrap things up. Let's thank Galib Dalai from Istanbul, Bilal Sambur from Ankara, and Sivan Saeed from London. And thank you for joining us here on this episode of Inside Story. If you've got anything you'd like to add, head over to our programme page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or send us your tweets to @AJ Inside Story. I'm Sami Zaidan from the whole team. For now, it's goodbye.